right, ladies and gentlemen, today's video is all about the constant of proportionality. We have been talking about ratios and rates and proportional relationships. And so now we're going to actually look at how mathematicians show these kind of relationships. And they show them using this thing called the constant of proportionality. This is a favorite question on the iReady exams, and you have probably seen it on a test before. And I can almost guarantee that you'll see it on the next big test you take in December. So you should be on page 62 in your notebooks. It is November 12th, 2013. Make sure your date and page number match. And our objective today is, I can identify the constant of proportionality in graphs, charts, verbal descriptions, and equations. So you're going to be looking in 4 different kinds of situations to find this constant of proportionality. But before we can start to find it, we have to actually figure out what on earth it is. So what is this constant of proportionality, this very fancy sounding math thing? All it is just a number that describes a relationship between 2 things. Simple as that. Mathematicians use the variable k for the constant of proportionality, and I know that can be a little bit confusing, using a variable for a constant, because isn't a constant just a plain old number? And yeah, for each individual situation, k is just a number, but we call it, we use a variable to represent it because in every situation, every relationship, that constant of proportionality is going to be different. So k is the constant of proportionality. Now I want to show you this fancy math definition because it's important to be able to look at a fancy math definition and understand what on earth it means. We have the, kind of logical definition right up here, but now the fancy math one is the constant value of the ratio of 2 proportional quantities x and y, usually written y equals k times x, where k is the factor of proportionality. Oh, and by the way, guys, you should be writing all of this down still on page 62. So let's look at this mathy definition for a minute. The constant value, what does that mean? That just means a number. 3, 7, 10, 1/2, etc. The constant value of the ratio, relationship, right? A ratio is a relationship between 2 things, comparing 2 things, of 2 proportional quantities, x and y. So those are the things, the 2 different things that you are comparing in your relationship. And it's usually written in this fancy all letters math equation that doesn't have any numbers. Y equals k times x, k being any number that describes the relationship, where k is the factor of proportionality. Factor of proportionality is the same thing as constant of proportionality. So we can break down this mathy definition. Don't get overwhelmed by mathy definitions. You can break them down and you can understand what on earth they mean. Make sure you have all of this written down, including the little notes that I've put on the page. And when you're ready, we're going to move on to how we actually find this constant of proportionality. This needs to be on page 63 in your notebooks. It is once again November 12th, 2013. And we're going to look at several different places you can find a constant of proportionality. One place you can find is in charts or tables, okay, where you have x values and y values and you're trying to figure out a relationship between them. So how do we find this constant of proportionality in a chart or a table? You need to ask yourself, how do I, that's a D, how do I get from x to y? Write that down. So if we look at our x's, we have a 2 here. How do I get from 2 to 8? Hopefully you answered multiply by 4. If you said add 6, when we're dealing with equations like this, think about multiplication, because that rule of multiplication is going to work more often than just a plain addition rule, okay? Then let's look at my next x and see if it's the same rule. Is 5 times 4 20? Yeah, it is. It's times 4 once again. What about this one down here, this decimal, 0.4 times 1.6, sorry, 0.4 times 4. Is that going to give me 1.6? And the answer is that yes, it will. So we have a constant, see what I did there? Constant number that we can multiply x by that's going to give us our y. So my constant of proportionality, I'm just going to write constant of p. My k, remember we said that constant of proportionality is going to be the letter k. K in this case equals 4. That's the number that I'm going to be constantly multiplying my x by to get my y. Does that kind of make sense, guys? Hopefully? There we go. I'll circle it because that's important. Constant of proportionality is 4. All right, so that's how we find it in charts. Let's look at an equation. Remember how we said that a proportional relationship is written in kind of this standard form, y equals kx. We have a y here, we have an equal sign, we have a number, and we have an x. Finding the constant of proportionality in an equation is very, very simple. It's just the number. Okay, so in this equation, k equals 4. How much more simple could that possibly be? Not much more simple. All right, we're going to go on to the next page because I gave you this graph during class today and I want you to have plenty of room. So we're on page 64. It is once again November 12th. And we are going to look at how to find this constant of proportionality in a graph. Now, if you recall, we've learned how to find something else in a graph. And what we've learned how to find in a graph is the unit rate. Do you remember that? And you know how we've been talking so much about unit rate? If we look at this graph here, and we're looking for the unit rate, remember how we did this in class the other day and in the videos? You'd go to the 1 on your x-axis. You go over to where x equals 1, and you take that straight up until it hits the graph of the line. And then you're going to take it and you're going to slide it straight over until it hits your y-axis. Wherever it hits your y-axis, that's the unit rate. So this one, the unit rate would be 2. You want to know what's really cool, guys? That unit rate is also your constant of proportionality, your k. So it's really simple. If you remember how to find it with, if you remember how to find the unit rate, then finding the constant of proportionality is exactly the same. And what's really neat about this constant of proportionality, if you have a graph that you know is proportional, and remember, you know if it's proportional, if it's a straight line and it goes through the origin. So if you have a graph that you know is proportional, and you can find the constant of proportionality, you can write the equation of this graph by simply using the standard form y equals kx. So in this case, the equation of this graph would simply be y equals 2x. How cool is that? All right, one last way I'm going to show you how to find this constant of proportionality is in verbal descriptions. That means words. We know how much you love words. You don't. Okay, word problems are not that scary, guys. Verbal descriptions, word descriptions. Let's just look at this for a moment. Let's read it together. John is mowing lawns to earn some money during the summer and charges homeowners $7 for every hour he spends mowing. Your constant of proportionality in a verbal description is what happens constantly every X. So every hour or every day or every box of tissues. For example, a box of tissues could be $3 each. So your constant of proportionality would be $3 for every single box of tissues. Here, he charges $7 for every single hour he mows. So your constant of proportionality, your K, is simply 7. Once again, for this one, we can write an equation once we know it's a proportional relationship. Once we find our constant of proportionality, our equation is simply y equals 7x. And we're done. Okay? All right, so those are the 4 different ways that you can find constants of proportionality. Make sure you have all the notes written down with all of my little, comments and writings. And your reflection question for today is to tell me what the constant of proportionality in this table is. And I'm going to tell you right now, be careful because I kind of made it a little bit tricky. And then if you want to earn some bonus points, you can write the equation that represents this table. Okay? Bonus points for writing the equation. You must tell me the constant of proportionality. Remember, constant of proportionality is how you get from X to Y. All right, guys, thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow in class. Bye-bye.